Hello, my viewers. How you guys doing today? This is your host, 5 minutes or less review with another long segmented video. Um, so basically, um, I've been looking at this DNA issue. A lot of people on both sides have been having problems, especially with the DNA problems, and I will just simply keep this thing short and sweet. Um, the mother barely have anything to contest whether she's the mother because the baby's coming out of her own body. The father has to guess whether it is his or not. Now, with DNA comes certainty that a child is definitely yours, and the mother and the father stand to gain to say, hey, listen, we brought this child into the world, and now that we have facts to show that we are actually the parents, it's best for us to cooperate, especially in the best possible situation, in order to make sure that we give our child the best possible future. Now, with that put to the side, I have seen a lot of people who've gone against DNA testing, and most of them happen to be women. I don't know what their problem is about, but I don't think that they should be in any position to be saying anything about it, because if there's anything, it helps their case in most of the situation. Now, besides helping their case, I can understand whereby they feel like as if the man is doubting them, that they've been not truthful, they've been they're not, how would I put it, they did not cheat in some way or form. I think that is something that they believe, that by doing so, that by having a DNA test, the man is doubting their fidelity. And I just want to make sure that a lot of women understand one thing, that this is not a fidelity argument. This is more like a man being assured that whatever is happening to him and this child, that he knows is his own blood, and he will go to any length to make sure that this child survives. Now, there's opponents on both sides, but somebody who's been trying to push a bill from in Tennessee, basically, that basically awards men some clarity when it comes to knowing whether this child is theirs, has been Antonio from Tennessee, and he's been doing so for about a year plus now. And I just stumbled upon this when me and a couple of other people were arguing concerning this DNA testing, and this came up. So I'm basically looking at this in Tennessee, and hopefully it gets pushed along. But you know, like every other thing in this state, especially with the bureaucracy and so on and so forth, it takes a long time for any of these things to actually manifest itself in our society. So, well, just look at it as I go through it with you guys. So,
a birth certificate can turn a joyous event into a nightmare with one question: who is the baby's real father? State Representative Antonio Parkinson of Shelby County says a bill he plans to present next week in Nashville will help answer that question.
Please remember that this is 1 year ago when this was shown, and I have all the links below, so if you guys want to follow along, you can follow along.
Better that we find out who the fathers are, the biological fathers are, on the front end than 5 years down the road or 10 years down the road.
Tennessee Representative Antonio Parkinson says a House bill he'll introduce next week in Nashville is focused on people who are unwed and men who, in his words, blindly and voluntarily sign a birth certificate without knowing if they're actually the biological father.
You can honestly get away with having a person off the street to voluntarily acknowledge paternity and they actually not be the father, and it will be accepted as evidence of paternity when it comes to a child support case.
Parkinson planned to introduce his bill Wednesday.
So, guys, you have to understand one thing. What is evidence? You know, what is evidence? Evidence should be something that's irrefutable to some degree. It's basically an item that makes a case for something that you believe it is. And many of the times, the courts often use signing on a birth certificate to indicate paternity. This should be inappropriate, especially since we've moved away from a lot of things that were done in the past, and now that we have DNA, those should be used as certainty for determining paternity. But as you guys will see during the course of us looking through this, you're going to see that the state also has an incentive not to do that. Let's move on.
Tuesday afternoon, but the Children and Family Affairs Subcommittee ran out of time. So Parkinson, who represents District 98 in Shelby County, will try again next week.
All this legislation would do is, if you want to voluntarily sign on that birth certificate, there's nothing wrong with that. And this legislation doesn't change that. So you can voluntarily sign, but in order to validate that birth certificate, you would just have to produce a DNA test saying that you're the father.
He said,
you see, so that is what it is basically. He's putting another layer as to validate the certificate. The birth certificate should not be the one and only way to certify that somebody is the parent to a child. Now that we have things like DNA testing, which can almost 100%, I think it's 99.9, let's just say 90% prove that a man is the biological father of a child, that should be more than satisfactory for the court in order for them to determine, hey, who is the biological parent of a child.
as a child deserves to know who their biological...
Now, another thing again you guys have to understand is this, that this law, this thing he's trying to introduce, does not waive anybody's right to simply not be able to sign the voluntary waiver that simply says, hey, you are the biological father. Right? It does not simply just do away with you simply saying, hey, before you can sign that, you have to produce a DNA. However, before the court should be able to use that signature against you in court, they should have a DNA done on the child to basically indicate that this child is yours. There is no irrefutable issue with that aspect, and then we can move on from that area to the other areas that need to be taken care of. It's as simple as that. We're no longer wasting time. But the question becomes, how much is DNA testing? How is DNA testing going to be basically, who's going to be the primary person who's going to be dealing with the cost of the DNA, right? Is it the family, or is it the state, or is it the hospital? Who is primarily going to be held accountable for the cost of the DNA testing? I personally say let the men do the DNA testing, because at the end of the day, it's them that the whole thing is going to be on. So let's just think about it like this. The woman goes through the process of doing having a child, right? The insurance covers her for having a child. The men might be able to pay for that DNA testing, which should be part of what insurance should cover, in order to make sure that the family basically gets a proper experience throughout this whole called child delivery process, you know? So that's the way I look at it.
Biological father is. And under this bill, a birth certificate would hold a biological father more accountable and prevent a heartbreaking mistake.
What if the actual biological father shows up later, and because this individual signed that birth certificate, then that actual biological father is robbed of his right legally to be a parent to his biological child? And that happens.
Some tough questions there, Park.
And basically, he's right in this situation, because in order for you to gain those rights to basically take over your own child's care, you have to go through the court, and that's going to cost you money, and you're going to go through all of this whole process of trying to get things done when you could have just paid up the upfront cost in the beginning and be done with it. Then nobody will have to contest you on this issue, and you already know that moving forward, that anything you're sinking into this baby, any investment or so on and so forth, especially with time and knowledge and so on and so forth, basically you know that you're sinking it into your own child, and you know that whatever you get from it, you get from it. So let's move on to the next video, and we'll continue from there.
Back on the show. So this is kind of basic. How in the hell can you be paying for a child? It ain't yours.
Yeah, we think it's basic. So let me throw this out there first. 1/3 of the signatures on birth certificates today are not the biological father.
Now I know you guys just heard that 1/3, and I was thinking that this was basically a scam or some kind of nonsense this guy was spewing. Well, guess what? I went ahead and I checked it out in the database, and the funny thing about it is, what actually is 1/3. And the thing about it is 1/3 because this situation is really underreported. Most guys just say, most guys just check out and move on or whatever it is. And I think I remember one point in which a woman had 6 children, and all 6 children was not from the biological man who had invested over 20 years trying to raise these children up. It's all 6 children. While this man was working hard at work, his neighbor was busy, putting it down to his old lady. So basically, all 6 children of his, because they all looked alike to some degree, he thought they were his, but he didn't know it was his neighbor's child. For over 20 years, in which he had already invested so much time trying to raise these children, going to work, never taking rest. And, personally, if it wasn't because I had really experienced this myself, and seen the situation where this man almost nearly committed suicide when he found out, because, and the way he found out was that one of the, I think 2 or 3 of the children were in the United States at that time, and they had filed to get their father over to the United States because they had already gotten their mother over to the United States, and they found out that he wasn't the biological father. And that was when the mother confessed that she had been sleeping with the neighbor, and she had all of them through the neighbor. And because of that, they had disowned, they decided to disown their mother. All 6 of them decided to disown their mother and claimed the man who had raised them as their father. But he didn't like the situation whereby he didn't have any child that was biologically his, so he had to start afresh again at his own age and picked himself a new woman to have children with. And now he has only 2 children now that are biologically his, and he made sure to do the DNA testing over 20-something years. The man was in his 60s trying to have children, that are biologically his. Because where we're from, we value biology, biological family. Now, in as much as he has taken these other kids as his own kids, that's another adoption. But at the end of the day, these other kids that he's having with this other woman are more likely his now. And he has spent so much time trying to impact into these other children that are now overseas his own knowledge that he didn't know it was not his. So those are the kind of pains that you have to understand that many men would go through. And I know a lot of men often do that. And, the thing when I brought it up to one of my grandmothers, she said, shh. She told me, shh, that these were the things that some of the women were doing back in the days when it was too hard for them to get children by their own husbands. That they would go ahead and sleep with somebody else who looked almost close to the husband to see whether he had seeds that they could borrow from him in order to present to the husband that that they were pregnant. Because many times men will not even admit that they are infertile. So you have to remember that some of these things are trade secrets from some of these women back in the day. And hey, I don't know. But anyway, let's move on with the show here.
Think about that. That's a huge number. 33%. 33% of the people that have signed a voluntary acknowledgement of paternity are not the actual father. Now, here's the rub. That means that there are 33% of real biological fathers whose children have been stolen from them through this voluntary acknowledgement of paternity program. I lean on the side that I think most fathers want to be in their children's lives. So that 33% has been robbed legally, state-sponsored, of the opportunity to be a parent to their children. Think about that.
So
now, let's try to understand this. So 33% have been robbed to be a father. Now, out of those 33%, how many of them really wanted to be a father, or who were almost forced to become fathers? Think about it. Also, how many of them actually wanted to become father? Maybe they're just playing the field, and this woman got pregnant. How many of them actually wanted to become fathers? But that does not take away from the situation. It's like simply saying, hey, we're not going to abolish a law because we normally have a guilty person in the crowd. Because, okay, let's just say 1/8 of the people that we capture are actually guilty of it, but the remaining 7/8 are not guilty. Right? So as a result of that, we're going to keep the law. That doesn't seem fair, is it? But like I just said, think about the other situation also. How many of them don't want to be a father? And this voluntary person is actually signing the certificate and making themselves accountable. And as a result of that, they're giving those children better homes. Let's move on.
So how does that work? That is, like, who decides to write in the father portion?
So anybody can sign a voluntary acknowledgement of paternity as long as the mother is okay with it. The only thing that they have to do is sign it in front of a notary. But there are no guardrails that would ensure that this person is actually the biological father.
So is your position that whoever is actually the biological father, they should be notified that they're the father? But what happens though if you are someone and you've been told it's yours, and here you are forced to pay child support, then you find out it's not yours?
Yeah, and that's exactly how I got on this situation. I had a young man stop me in the barbershop, and he said, I thought I had a child with a lady that I was in a long-term relationship with. We went to juvenile court. When her mother told me that she'd been with her ex-boyfriend the whole time, I got a DNA test, went to juvenile court. The juvenile court magistrate banged the gavel down and said, somebody's got to feed him, and it's going to be you. And he was stuck with that child support. Not just that, but he walked out of that court in arrears because they went back to the birth of the child. And when he did not get
wait, hold on. They're in court. They established he is not the biological father, and the judge still said you got to pay?
The judge still said you got to pay. And the way this thing works is this: when you voluntarily sign, you got 60 days to take your name back off of there. And they come to me and say, well, he could always ask the lady for a DNA test. I said, well, okay, let's talk about that. You're in the hospital. You know, probably the grandparents are around, the other siblings. You're in there with the lady, and she's holding her new bundle of joy, and you're in a relationship with this person. And so you're going to turn around and say, hey, oh yeah, by the way, I want to get a DNA test. You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. Your relationship is over with at that point. If the DNA results come back, say you are the father, your relationship is over with. If the DNA test comes back, say you're not the father, your relationship is over with. And so that's not reality, right? And I had a young man, I've gotten more calls about this than any other bill I've passed, right? I had a young man call me today. He said, I was 19 years old and I was in the hospital, all her family's around, and there was no way that I could ask for a DNA test. No way, right? And so what we're doing is making it required only to validate your name on that birth certificate. So what we're saying is this: you can still voluntarily sign, but you have to produce DNA results that say you are the actual father, so that your name can be validated on that birth certificate. So who is paying for that? So is that going to be the state? Is that going to be the individual? So how's this thing going to work out? That when a child is born, are they going to take the DNA at that moment? I mean, so what's going to actually happen? So this is how it works. So and I got to give you a little background for you to understand this. Per Health and Human Services in DC, they say the states have to have 3 ways of acknowledging paternity. 3 ways. One is voluntary acknowledgement of paternity program. Now that's for people that want to sign, and this is who we're targeting, right? Then you have DNA tests for contested births, ones that didn't want to sign, right? Then you have the fact that people are married. So it's automatically presumed by law that the father in a marriage is the father of the child. But we're focusing on voluntary acknowledgement, the ones that want to voluntarily sign. They feel like, or have been told, maybe by the mother, or had been led to believe that they are the father of this child, right? And so they want to sign. And we don't have a problem with that. You can want to sign and sign. But the process will not be complete until you produce the results of the DNA saying that you are the actual father. Because if that DNA test comes back and says you're not the father, then it's paternity fraud for you to sign on there. And if that DNA test comes back and says you are the father, then it will be validated. But think about this though, and this is the angle I'm coming from on this. Not to fault women or anybody else, but I believe that if you are a father by DNA, you deserve the right, you have the right to be a parent to your child legally. Under the law right now, they are taking that right away from the actual biological parent by not having safeguards in place to make sure it's the biological parent that gets that right. Because once you sign, you are the legal parent of that child.
Questions from my panel. Jeff?
Want to make sure I hit
there
that.
You go.
Yeah, I'm here. Thanks, Representative Parkinson, down the street from you in Nashville. Man, it's good to see you here. Know a lot of people who talk about the work that you're doing. Congratulations. Listen, there are tons of stories that you're saying. As a pastor, I have tons of people.
All right, guys. I don't think I'm going to continue here with you guys, but you guys will just have to bear with me on this one. So let's move on to the last video that concerned this issue, and then we'll move forward. All right.
Prevent unmarried men from claiming a child that isn't biologically their own is making its way through the Tennessee legislature. Action News 5's Bria Bolden spoke with the local lawmaker behind this bill to find out why he believes the law is needed. Bria?
Well, Joe, House Bill 2698 passed through the Children and Family Affairs Subcommittee.
2698, guys. Just remember that. Just go type it on your on the Tennessee this thing if you want to support it. 2698. All right, guys.
Today now, but it didn't come without a challenge from the Tennessee Department of Human Services. Memphis Representative Antonio Parkinson is sponsoring the House version of this bill, and he told me today he has spoken with constituents who said they've had to foot the bill for child support even after finding out a child they originally thought was theirs was not.
He presented the magistrate with the DNA findings. The magistrate said, somebody gotta take care of him, referring to the child, and it's going to be you, and gavelled him out.
This is the full story. Representative Antonio Parkinson is
talking. So let's move forward.
The state has been turning a blind eye to this by allowing people to sign blindly without any proof of DNA association to this child, which is allowing people to be guilty, or in some cases, of paternity fraud, which is a crime.
Paternity fraud.
So as you guys can see, this thing is actually moving forward. Hopefully we can get there. But let's look at this from somewhere else again.
However, the Tennessee Department of Human Services
Logical father.
All right.
Bunch of low quality gatekeepers.
If made into law, their department could be at risk of losing about $52 million in federally
Are you guys seeing this? About 50, you know, this is an approximation. It's not reality, an approximation. $52 million that can be lost from child services. $52 million if this law gets forward. That's 2689. Bill 8629 in the House bill. 2689. Guys. Yeah.
matched dollars.
I guess the concerns that we have is that the bill would possibly put us out of compliance with the federal regulations.
After speaking with attorneys from the U.S. Department of Human Services, Representative Parkinson says the bill would not affect the money the state receives.
Like I always say, follow the money.
Budget Reconciliation Act.
So,
the passing of the Omnibus Budget Reconciliation Act, or the OBRA, occurred in 1993. And according to the Office of Inspector General,
I don't get a strike for this.
And this is in 1997.
I hope I don't get a strike for this, man. Seriously, there's a song in the background. Oh, Jesus, man. MHD, come on, dude. I hope there's no strike for this music playing in the background. Alright, guys, I think I'm going to have to stop there. I'm not going to take a chance with this video. But you guys heard it. And if you guys want to basically watch anything else, just go ahead. I'll put the link in the video below. Go ahead, watch it, see what it's all about, see what you can get from it, and hopefully follow this bill moving forward. But other than that, guys, it's been a blast hanging out with you guys. This is your host, 5 minutes or less review, bringing to you crucial topics and developing topics as we move along. So yeah, good stuff. All right, guys, It's been a blast. Take it